What's up, military millionaires? Today I'm going to answer quite possibly the most important question I've ever gotten about real estate. Not really, but if you want to start investing in real estate, but you can't determine if you need an LLC or how to start one, then you're in luck, because today's video is going to explain what an LLC is, if you need an LLC, and how to start one if you do. Spoiler alert, they're really freaking easy to start. Like, I've done like 4 of them now, and I'm not an attorney. So, my name is David Perret, and I am an active duty Marine, real estate investor, and the founder of the Military Millionaire community. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to the community, and be sure to plug into our incredible Facebook group and other resources by just clicking the links that are down in the description. If, on the other hand, I am being so overly exaggerated today, you're already in the community, welcome back, and thanks for the support. One of the questions I get asked all the time is whether or not you need to start an LLC or have an LLC to start real estate investing. And as with most things worth pondering in life, the answer is, it depends. Limited liability companies have their place in your asset protection strategy for investments. And at the time of this writing, I'm actually a member of 4 different LLCs. For my wife and I's rental portfolio, for a large partnership deal, and then one for the Military Millionaire community and online dealings, although that might become an S-Corp soon, but that's a topic for a later date. And most recently, to take down a deal with a member of the War Room Real Estate Mastermind, and consequently my roommate, right? So, 4 different LLCs, so I'm definitely a fan of LLCs, but that does not mean that you need them. In fact, there are times when you shouldn't have one, and I'm going to cover that as well. Now, as my portfolio continues to grow and evolve, I am certain that I will probably add more LLCs and eventually even some more complicated asset protection strategies. I am obligated to tell you, I'm not a freaking attorney or a tax professional, right? I'm an average dude who's done some research. So definitely recommend that you consult with a professional before making a final decision. So don't come at me, bro, if you get an LLC and it freaking sucks because you didn't talk to somebody professional. Now, what is a LLC, right? The LLC thing that people keep talking about is going to be broken down Barney style right now. But first, here's the technical definition. Investopedia says that a limited liability company is a business structure in the United States whereby the owners are not personally liable for the company's debts or liabilities. Limited liability companies are a hybrid entity that combine the characteristics of a corporation with those of a partnership or sole proprietorship. Now, if that wasn't lame or boring enough, here's what it sounds like as defined by the IRS. Depending on elections made by the LLC, and number of members of the IRS will treat an LLC as either a corporation, partnership, or as part of an LLC owner's tax return, a disregarded entity. Now, specifically, a domestic LLC with at least 2 members is classified as a partnership for federal income tax purposes unless it files Form 8832 and affirmatively elects to be treated as a corporation. For income tax purposes, an LLC with only 1 member is treated as an entity disregarded as separate from its owner unless it files Form 8832 and elects to be treated as a corporation. However, for the purposes of employment tax and certain exercise taxes, an LLC with only 1 member is still considered a corporate or separate entity. Look, I know that's super boring, but right, check it out. One of them talks about like the asset protection side, one talks about the tax side, and that's going to be important here. So in layman's terms, a limited liability company is an entity that allows you to own assets or businesses without them being tied to you personally and without them being tied to your name or personal assets. And this makes it easier to reap the benefits of tax deduction and minimize your personal exposure to liabilities if something goes wrong, which of course nothing will ever go wrong because everybody in real estate makes so much money and there's never any problems. Don't worry about the lawsuit that I'm still in 2 years later, right? First, we're going to talk about naming your LLC or filing a doing business as. Now, you can name your LLC anything you want, now, provided that the name isn't already in use in your state. As mentioned above, I'm a 50-50 owner in 4 different LLCs, and 2 of them have very legit and professional LLC names like FMTM LLC or Perret Rental Properties, and 2 of them make bankers laugh and ask, really? Like One Uncle Deep or 2 Boots, because the guys who founded it are both Boots. So The beauty is that it doesn't matter what your name or what you name your LLC, because you can file a doing business as, or a DBA, with your Secretary of State in order to operate under a different name. You could be 123 LLC doing business as Mickey Mouse Estates, and you could brand everything as Mickey Mouse Estates, but your LLC is still 123 LLC for tax purposes. Hope that makes sense, right? So in my case, I can have Parade Rental Properties, but then operate under Freedom Properties if I should choose to use a DBA rather than just creating a fifth LLCs. Alternatively, you could name your LLC, smash the like button, and you could be doing a business as I'm Awesome, because everybody knows if you smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm, you are in fact awesome. And that was a stretch, but I really appreciate the engagement to help this video out if you're getting something out of the content. Now, when might you need an LLC? Really, like when you don't want to accept the amount of risk associated with your asset. For example, suppose you had a tenant slip on your stairs and break their back. Then, of course, because they're just idiots, they decide to file a lawsuit claiming that the guardrail at your apartment was unstable and that you knew about it. And if a court were to rule in their favor and say that you owed significant damages to the tenant, but you didn't have the money to pay them, you could be exposed to significant risk. Theoretically, a court could actually force the sale of your property in order to use the profit to pay your tenant's damages. Now, however, when you have a large mortgage on the property and only a little equity, it's less likely to occur because forcing the sale of your property still wouldn't result in you being able to pay the damages. That's another reason leverage is awesome. Now, if you own this rental in your own name, they could force you to sell personal assets like your primary residence, cars, or whatever, rifle, I don't know, in order to pay the damages. But on the other hand, if you own this property inside of an LLC, which has not been pierced and they can't tie that LLC to you personally, if there are no other properties in that LLC, then your liability would be minimal because you have no assets worth stealing or selling. Sorry, selling, not stealing, because it's not stealing if you get screwed by the courts, right? And I guess it's probably the other person. That's rude. After they come after you personally, because the home is owned by an LLC and not you. Now, you need to determine what amount of risk you're willing to take, and then separate your property acquisitions accordingly. So personally in Missouri, I assume that somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million is the amount of property that I would want a single LLC. After I own $1 million in a single LLC, probably around 8 to 10 homes, I start a new LLC as I purchase, and then I purchase more real estate in that one. As my portfolio grows, I'm sure that I will assume more risk in each LLC, but time will tell. This will of course be different for everyone, but I just wanted to give you an example of how to think of this. Now, tax advantages. Having an LLC also makes it easier to document your income and expenses for the business. If you own assets personally and you run all of the income and expenses through your personal bank accounts, it can get tricky to handle your taxes. On the other hand, if you own your assets in an LLC and you have a separate bank account set up for your LLC to handle all of the income and expenses for your portfolio, taxes become quite simple because you can file an annual tax return for your limited liability company using all the income and expenses from that entity and that bank account. And then the bottom line, where it says how much you get back or how much you owe, will then get transcribed onto your personal tax return, and it'll just get added in or subtracted out, right, as income or expense. On the back end, your personal tax return would then be filed, and you will pay or receive a return based on your total tax flow from the LLC through your personal account. So it's like LLC made money, you owe taxes, that goes into your personal return, which was going to get taxes, now it evens out, right? So when do you not need an LLC? In fact, there are probably more situations where you don't need an LLC than when you do need them. And like wanting an LLC may be a different story though, depending on your risk tolerance. You may not need one, but anyway. As it is always more of a personal preference, in my opinion, whether you need an LLC or not. So for starters, you don't need, actually you can't have an LLC when purchasing a primary residence. So if you intend to house hack as a duplex for your first investment, which I absolutely love, and that's what I did, your lender won't even let you take title in an LLC because it's a primary residence. You can't buy it in a business because it's a primary residence. So if you use a VA loan or an FHA loan or another primary residence loan, they will require you to take title in your personal name, right? Well, a lot of people begin their investing journey with a house hack, which is my personal favorite strategy. So an LLC would be pointless to worry about at this point. An LLC is probably unnecessary for your first purchase in general, depending on how expensive it is, but that isn't to say that you couldn't or shouldn't set up an LLC. But don't let it stop you from buying your first deal. People get wrapped up around having an LLC, and that shouldn't be worth stopping you. So we're going to talk about setting them up real quick. Setting up a limited liability company is actually quite simple. there are a few documents required in order to be considered a legitimate LLC. And at least in my state, you can file everything online in a matter of minutes. Hell, for my first LLC, I basically took an editable version of my property manager's formation documents, changed some dates, names, and filed that. So that being said, for legal reasons, I must reiterate that you need to consult with an attorney and get LLC drafted professionally. Don't try to blame me if you file some dumb crap with your state and you get sued and your LLC doesn't hold up in court, right? Just no, not my problem. Articles of organization. The Articles of Organization are a short, concise list that outlines the initial statements required to form a limited liability company. In my experience, this is a 1 or 2 page document, and really the only thing that changes is the name of the LLC, the members, date of organization, and the primary purpose of the LLC. In fact, forming one right now, here you go, 2 pages. That's the Articles of Organization. Now, the operating agreement, on the other hand, that's all of this. The operating agreement is the key document used by the limited liability company to outline the business, finances, and functional decisions of the LLC. This includes regulations, provisions, exclusions, members, initial and subsequent capital investments, distribution, and etc. Essentially, the operating agreement is the long document that dictates how the LLC will operate in all facets of its business. Now, this is where you outline the responsibilities and conflict resolution, the whole 9 yards. This is the one where you need to pay attention. I want to talk to you guys real quick about the best clause ever. You can get as detailed as you wish with the operating agreement, and on my most recent LLC formation, my partner, who's a recon Marine, and I even included this ridiculous clause at the bottom of our conflict resolution section. In the event that resolution attempts do not solve the member deadlock, fate shall be determined by a duel in which both members will be armed with a paintball gun, 3 paintballs, and a face shield. Standing back to back, each member will take 3 paces, 6 steps, away from the other, turn, and fire all 3 rounds. Impact on the face mask is worth 2 points. Impact on the body is worth 1 point. Total points after all 3 rounds have been fired, deemed the winner. You can't beat that for conflict resolution. Next up is minutes of meetings. Now, this is not required in order to form your entity, but you should strive to keep notes of any and all meetings that your LLC has to both document decisions that are made and prove the LLC is conducting ongoing business meetings. It's just a good practice to show that your company is still operational and functional in the event of a lawsuit. To file with your Secretary of State. Straight up, you can file to form an LLC online. I did it like last week. And in order to file for an LLC, you simply need to contact your Secretary of State and talk to them about the process or hire an attorney. So, do you need an LLC? Here's the question you've all been waiting for. Here's the too long didn't watch or the bottom line up front or whatever, which doesn't work on YouTube because if you made it to this. But an LLC is a good idea for asset protection and to start treating your investments as a business. It is not, however, something that you should get hung up on. You can form an LLC at any time, and forming an entity does not need to be another roadblock to justify your analysis paralysis. So if you've been freaking out about setting one up, either do it or stop freaking out about it and go buy some real estate. That's all I got. Have a great day. Smash that like button, subscribe, and woo! Thanks.